we were total homebodies this year, and it was great. My husband and I stayed in. We made a bunch of comfort food and feasted all night. And then we got to play. So we are planning a trip to Japan later this year. And we got this Lego set that's the skyline of Tokyo. And it is the cutest thing ever. It has Mount Fuji and Shibuya Crossing, and there were even little Lego cherry blossoms. So we felt like kids putting it together, and it was such a fun evening.
Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a CPA podcast presented by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The center is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the chartered professional accountant profession in Alberta. For the record, this CPA podcast isn't about bean counting. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics.
Hello, I'm Gord Beal, Senior Vice President with CPA Alberta, and I'm your host for this episode, our first episode of 2025. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to wish all Uncommon Sense listeners a Happy New Year. Thank you for making our podcast a success since its relaunch in September of last year. We hope you will continue to tune in every Thursday for new episodes throughout 2025. To mark the first episode of the new year, we have a very accomplished guest with us today, and we're going a little bit off script. And what we've been doing is, generally speaking, bringing Alberta CPAs in and talking to you. But we're very lucky today because we have a very accomplished individual who's right at the heart of looking at the new CPA program. So really thought this would be a great way to start the new year. It's my pleasure to welcome Lara Greguric FCPA, FCA to the podcast. Lara has worked for the accounting profession for 17 years in various education leadership positions. In her most recent role as the Executive Vice President Learning at the CPA Western School of Business, she is responsible for enabling student competency development, overseeing educational contractor relations, and creating valued partnerships with key external parties, including post-secondary institutions and employers. The CPA Western School of Business delivers the Professional Education Program, or PEP, as you may hear us refer to throughout this podcast, to all CPA candidates in the 4 Western provinces and the 3 territories. Lara is also chair of the new CPA Certification Program Steering Committee, the team responsible for creating a modernized certification program for the CPA profession. Prior to joining the school, Lara held senior roles in the pharmaceutical, financial services, and the advisory services sectors. In this episode, Lara will talk with me about the journey toward earning the designation in 2025 and beyond, what is changing, and how the education of future CPAs is responding to external trends and factors. So if you're considering becoming a CPA, or a parent or a friend of someone thinking about earning the designation, or you're with a company or organization that hires CPAs, I think you'll be interested in hearing what Lara has to say with us. So let's get started. Welcome, Lara.
Oh, thank you very much, Gord. I have to say that I'm a huge fan of this podcast. I do listen regularly while I'm taking the dogs out for a walk. I think what you're doing is amazing. And so what an honor it is to be here with you today. And I'll try not to fangirl too much.
Well, it's great to have you, Lara, and thank you so much for those comments. We're certainly trying our best with the podcasts and enjoying doing them, and we've had some amazing guests. So we're so lucky to have you as our first guest of this year. To begin, Lara, when I think about it, and as in my introductions, I'm realizing, wow, you've done a lot with your career, and so much of your career has likely led you to the perfect spot where you're helping us develop the future of the profession. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your professional background and how being an accountant led to your current role in the profession.
Well, sure. So I do want to say you mentioned some influencers during the introduction. And so what I wanted to touch upon first was that I grew up in Southern Ontario, and I was really lucky because my next door neighbor happened to be my high school accounting teacher. And so a good friend of his also had a local accounting firm where I was able to do a high school co-op term. So I got exposed to accounting as a career path very early on. So I think it just goes to show you the importance of influencers and mentors. So I would say, fellow CPAs, please do sing the praises of the profession. I think that young people are quite eager to be inspired, and I certainly was. And I wouldn't be here today if I weren't able to, hear what those influencers had to say. So I'd say career-wise, CPAs are highly sought after. I think the skill sets that you develop as a CPA make you very employable. So I used my early career as an opportunity to try out some different industries and see what I liked. So I qualified at a Big Four firm. Then I spent a few years at the corporate office of CIBC. And then I eventually landed in the pharmaceutical sector. And I think one of the things that's important to know about me is that I'm very values driven. So the work that I'm doing does need to align with my values, but I also need to see that I'm making a difference. So the pharmaceutical company that I ended up working for was part of the Johnson & Johnson family of companies. And one of the things that makes them unique is that they have a credo. And so it basically lays out their values and it talks about how they do business. And during my time there, I witnessed firsthand just how seriously they take their credo and how senior management is regularly referring to that credo when they're making some really difficult business decisions. So I think that exposure to ethics and values as a foundation for decision making alongside the ethical mindset of a CPA really formed who I am as a professional. And so why that's relevant is when an opportunity came up to join the CPA Western School of Business, I was super excited because I could leverage my expertise as a CPA, but I could also do work that is very much aligned with my values.
That's great, Laura. That's a wonderful background. And I have to say, now I understand why, one of the reasons why we get along as well as we do. And I've known you for a while, and I have similar background to that. And you're right. I think we as CPAs, I think it's important to let people know what a great profession it is. And I also was drawn into the profession by a CPA. I didn't know I wanted to be one, and the individual helped me see what the possibilities were, and I've been very fortunate as well. And it's amazing how it leads you to the opportunities that lie ahead, and letting you really explore work that hopefully ties, as you say, directly to your personal values. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I wonder if, as we sort of go forward with this now, as the fact that the CPA Western School of Business found you and have you now is amazing. And certainly your role is incredible in terms of what you're doing. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what qualifications a person needs to be admitted to the program, because your work is so fundamental in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll give you just a little bit of a background on the school and then talk about kind of some of the qualifications. So the CPA Western School of Business is providing competency-based learning program to over 15,000 learners. And we're based in Western Canada, but also Northern Canada. And so those learners would be on a journey towards a CPA designation. And so I'm holding the role of Executive Vice President of Learning at the school. So essentially, I'm supporting learners in their competency development. I have to say, I love my job. I am so fortunate to play a role in helping thousands of learners realize their career aspirations and become CPAs. And I think that's pretty cool. So my team manages all the contractors that are working in the program. So basically the facilitators and session leaders that work directly with learners. We're also playing a role in learner support and helping them achieve success in the program as well. And then we also work very closely with post-secondary institutions to help them prepare learners to enter the CPA program. So speaking of entering the program, there are basically three main requirements that learners would have to satisfy to gain admission to CPA PEP, which is the professional education program. So firstly, they would need, typically they'd need a degree. And so the degree does not necessarily need to be in accounting. There is some flexibility there in that it can be in any field of study. And so for anyone who doesn't have a degree, though, there's also another path to admission that we call the mature student path. And so individuals who don't have a degree would have to bring at least 8 years of relevant work experience, and then they can still gain admission that way. And then secondly, applicants would also need to have 120 credit hours of post-secondary education. So typically what we see is that those credit hours are satisfied as part of the degree, but they don't need to be. And so a typical 4-year degree is equal to 120 credit hours. And then thirdly, they would need to complete 14 prerequisite courses currently and earn a minimum GPA of 65% in the core prerequisite courses. And so these courses can be completed either as part of their degree, or learners can take these courses after their degree at either a post-secondary institution or through the CPA Western School of Business.
Wow, that's great. Thanks for that, Lara. And that's interesting. I got to share something personal, but I know that one interesting feature of the Western School of Business is that it offers preparatory courses for individuals who might not already have the post-secondary prerequisites for entry into the professional education program. And I just have to share with you that my son has decided to go for his CPA. In fact, he decided, I guess, about a couple of years ago, and he didn't quite have the credits out of university because he did a slightly different degree. But he then did take prep courses. And funny enough, I mean, I've become, of course, a CPA here in Alberta. But as I learn about it, as he's gone through the process, I've learned a little bit about the experiences he's had, and he's really enjoying it. And I wonder if you can explain how that part of the school's operation works. Only thing I know about it really is through my, to a large extent, through what I've been hearing with my son, and his experience has been very good.
Well, first of all, I'm always excited to hear that there's going to be a new CPA. So excellent.
Yeah, pretty proud of him. Pretty proud of him.
Oh, absolutely. As you should be. That's great. So I just mentioned the 14 prerequisite courses. And so some of the students are completing those prerequisites as part of their degree. And, typically they'd have an accounting degree. And so they'd be ready to be admitted to the CPA PEP as soon as they graduate. But other students might have a degree in another discipline. So they might have completed, I'd say, none of the prerequisites or maybe only some of them. And so the CPA Western School of Business does offer all 14 of the prerequisite courses. And it's through what we call the CPA preparatory courses. And so basically these courses are designed for people who are working. So they're delivered online. It's a very flexible part-time kind of self-study format. And they are kind of designed, again, to be self-study, super flexible. So if people are willing to invest, say, 15 to 20 hours of study per week, then each of the courses can be completed in about 6 to 8 weeks. But you don't have to complete them that quickly, again, because it is flexible self-study. You could take longer if you want. There's also an exam that corresponds to each of those courses. And those exams are offered 4 times per year. And I think the neat thing about the preparatory courses is that enrollment is open year-round. So students wouldn't have to wait, for a particular registration period to enroll. They can enroll at any time. And so I'd say just with the prep courses that, they offer a very focused and affordable way to meet the prerequisite requirements for CPA PEP.
I think that's great. It's interesting because I've been impressed with my son's ability to really, it's the self-discipline. They do need a bit of self-discipline, but it's a good opportunity actually to practice that as they advance deeper into the program, I'm suspecting. But what I really am impressed as I listen to you is it seems to give different individuals who have maybe done different kinds of undergrad work with a pathway to get into the professional program.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really the coolest thing about the preparatory courses.
Yeah.
Essentially, you can have a degree in any discipline. And so, if you haven't picked up all of those prereqs, there's a path there for you.
That's great. That's great work. Thanks for that, Lara. So taking a little bit of a different tack here, I know we hear a lot these days about trends in artificial intelligence, data analytics, ESG or environmental, social, and governance principles, various technologies, and how these are reshaping aspects of the business world and I guess also the accounting world. Are these types of trends affecting the content and direction of the programming at the Western School of Business?
Yes, definitely. So the trends that you've noted are certainly reshaping the business world. And when we look at aspiring CPAs, they are going to need to be prepared to work in that changing environment. So from the profession's perspective, we are currently developing a number of toolkits that are going to help learners develop those competencies in some of these new areas. So we're developing 4 new toolkits. One's in emerging and transformative technologies. We have another in sustainability. There's also one for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also one for Indigenous views. And so when we look at these toolkits, we're wanting to ensure that they contain some curated resources that are going to help learners navigate some of these new topic areas. And we also want to make sure that they're highly engaging. So the vision is that we'd be including various kind of multimedia formats. We'd have audio, video, and then there's some interactive simulation to help learners build some knowledge and skills in these areas. I think one of the other things that we very much recognize is that some of these new areas aren't necessarily covered consistently at the undergraduate level in accounting programs. And so we're also going to be sharing these toolkits with post-secondary institutions as soon as they're available.
Oh, that's excellent. So the work you're doing will help to benefit others in terms of the educational process as well.
Absolutely.
And I think you've mentioned this, and it's great, all those areas as they are emerging trends. And I think you've already kind of covered on this, but I was curious and wanted to ask sort of around the whole increased emphasis on inclusivity in the professional world. And particularly when it comes to historically disadvantaged individuals and groups such as the Indigenous communities, Indigenous Canadians, and New Canadians. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. So at the school, in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the school did partner with the Aboriginal Financial Officers Association of Alberta and also with CPA Canada. And so we're offering the Indigenous Learners in Accounting Initiative, or ILA. And so through ILA, we are aiming to increase Indigenous representation in accounting. And so we have a series of courses and modules that they're based on our regular CPA certification program. But what we've done is tailored that content to address some of the challenges that are unique to Indigenous learners. And we're also incorporating Indigenous culture and context in the program. And so I think the cool thing is that each course and module is also taught by Indigenous instructors, and they're supported by Indigenous facilitators as well. And so we did have some excellent news fairly recently in that the TD Bank recently made a $560,000 donation to support the ILA initiative. It's a very generous donation, and it's really going to help expand ILA's impact. So I have to say, if there's any other corporate donors out there who are listening and are interested in contributing, please do get in touch. But so we're doing a lot on the Indigenous front through ILA. And then similarly, when it comes to New Canadians, the school's also undertaken a number of pilot studies and some other research, where the aim here is really to identify some of the barriers to success for international learners. And we also are looking to implement some supports that are aimed at enabling their success in the program. So I'm proud to really say that the work that we're doing in these areas demonstrates the school's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Wow, that really is impressive, and it gives me, real pride to think of how the work you're doing to really enhance access to the profession for individuals with a variety of backgrounds, and that's so critical in our world today, and wonderful to be able to offer those opportunities. So I'm wondering maybe we go from here because, here we're talking about the great things that are happening Alberta and Western Canada. So let's maybe talk for a moment around what's happening across, if you don't mind, across Canada. Is the postgraduate education the same for CPAs to be the individuals who are looking to become CPAs, regardless of where in Canada they earn the designation? I guess in other words, do new CPAs across Canada all need to meet the same standards and receive the same education?
Ooh, great question. So I would say that regardless of where in Canada learners are earning their designation, they all have to meet the same standards for becoming CPAs. So we've got a final a common final examination, what we call the CFE, and all learners write that exam. The CFE is a standard exam. It is consistent across the country. And then similarly, we also have some common practical experience requirements. Again, those are consistent across the country. I'd say that where we do see some differences across the regions is in how education is delivered. So as an example, so here I'd say, well, across the country, we have a profession-delivered CPA professional education program, or PEP, and that's offered in all regions across the country, and it's consistent. But the profession also accredits post-secondary institutions to deliver education programs that are equivalent to CPA PEP. And so as an example, in Alberta, the U of A offers a Master of Accounting program, and that program's been accredited by the profession. And so I would say that the mix of accredited programs does vary across the country. So in Western and Atlantic Canada, we tend to have fewer accredited programs, and a greater proportion of our learners are in the profession-delivered CPA PEP, whereas in Ontario and Quebec, they tend to have a larger number of accredited programs. But I would say, regardless of where learners are coming from, and that's both geographically or whether they're coming from an accredited program or CPA PEP, they all meet the same standards.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. It's certainly, I guess to some extent I'm aware of it, but to hear you talk about how that standard right across Canada really is set there, and we're creating Canadian CPAs. And I will say, over the last decade or so, I've done a fair amount of work internationally, and will say that the Canadian CPA is highly respected and certainly sought after. And so, in that context, I guess maintaining those standards certainly helps to contribute to that kind of respect that we get.
Absolutely. I mean, there's national consistency on that front, and to your point, that's exactly what allows us to be recognized internationally as well.
I think that's great. So I'm wondering if we can also talk about, my sense is that there's still a great interest in the profession. I hear from a lot of people who are curious about it, and I wonder from where you're sitting, Lara, in terms of your role with the CPA Western School of Business, are you seeing interest and enrollment in the profession still high amongst recent post-secondary grads and others? Are you seeing any kind of notable trends, positive or otherwise, I guess, in the level of interest and enrollment that we're seeing with individuals obtaining the CPA designation?
Yeah, so interest in obtaining the CPA designation definitely continues to be strong. What I will say is that we had kind of some wonky trends over the pandemic. I think all higher education institutions experienced that, where enrollment patterns were a little bit unpredictable. But with the pandemic behind us, that has certainly settled now. And the good news is that the school has over 15,000 learners that are in our programs and courses. And so I'd say eventually all of those individuals are going to become CPAs. And so, looking to the future, we do have some aging demographics. We're looking at retirements of some of our members. And so what we do want to ensure is that we continue to have that healthy pipeline of aspiring CPAs so that we can meet market demand. And so this is where I think as CPAs, each of us can play a role in showcasing the profession. So be loud and be proud. CPAs are highly sought after. So talk about the amazing opportunities that a CPA designation brings. Talk about the doors that a CPA designation opens, and really talk about the value that CPAs create. As I mentioned earlier, that's how I was attracted to the profession. So I know that works.
Yeah, that's a great point. Excellent. And certainly the number of CPAs I talk to, they don't necessarily know exactly where they ended up, that they didn't anticipate that necessarily when they got into the program, but the opportunities that opened up as a result of getting into the program really is something that they reflect on. And so great to hear that the interest is still high, and certainly we're proud CPAs and want to continue seeing people come into the profession. So thanks, Lara. So I'm wondering, on that front, I guess, in terms of developing future CPAs, as you know, I also started my career in Ontario. I have moved since to Alberta and become a CPA here in Alberta. But I also spend a fair amount of time working with CPA Canada, and the work that we did around foresight and our work in the future of the profession did lead to some input and some work that has helped shape some of the competencies in the new competency map side of things. But I know there's so much more work happening on that front that you're directly involved with, and I wonder if you could explain a little bit about what a competency map is and how the new map aligns with the work being done by the new CPA certification program steering committee.
Oh, absolutely.
And you chair that committee, and so I'm thinking maybe you can share a little bit of insight for us.
Certainly. So I'll start with the competency map. And you're right, Gord, the work that was done by Foresight certainly laid the foundation for the profession's new competency map. So basically, a competency map is, as it sounds, it outlines the skills and competencies that are required for certification as a CPA. And so our new competency map that was recently released is pretty much building on all of those traditional areas of expertise that CPAs have always been known for. So areas such as financial reporting, management decision-making, there's assurance and trust, taxation, finance. I'm sure I'm missing a couple. So we'll say all those good traditional areas. But it's also introducing some new areas of opportunity where CPAs can also add value. So areas like sustainability and ESG, value creation, data governance, and even emerging technologies. So what the new map is really doing is ensuring that CPAs are going to continue to remain relevant, especially since we know that the business environment is changing rapidly. As you mentioned, I do chair the new CPA certification program steering committee. And our mandate is really to bring the profession's new competency map to life through a new and modernized CPA certification program. So we have already designed the new program model. So it does include a number of modules, and there's some exams that learners complete alongside their practical experience. And then what we're currently doing right now is putting the finishing touches on program learning outcomes. And once those are finalized, we'll be able to move on to program development. So our aim is to launch the new program, I'd say no earlier than early 2027.
That's great. Very exciting. I mean, all those new areas of opportunity, I'm sure will even further enhance the excitement from young people to hopefully get into the profession. I think about those opportunities and think, wow, what an exciting time to potentially be or become an accountant, which is kind of funny to me, but at the same time is really exciting. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I wonder if maybe as you're saying all these changes, can you maybe say to us, share with the audience what you would say have been the biggest changes in the school's programs and offerings over the course of your time working there?
Sure. So maybe one of the things I'd like to refer to, if I may, I know that the AICPA has this national pipeline advisory group that recently put out a report on strategies to boost the accounting pipeline in the US. And one of the strategies that they identified was changing the culture in accounting education from one of weeding out to one of pulling through. And I think that really resonated with me because it perfectly describes what the school has been trying to do, certainly over the time that I've been here. So we have put a lot more emphasis on accessibility and flexibility. I think the one-size-fits-all approach of the past doesn't really work anymore. So students really need more tailored offerings and supports. And, the Indigenous Learners in Accounting Initiative is a prime example of that. I think the fact that CPA preparatory courses are offered as open enrollment, self-study courses that can be completed at a learner's own pace is another example of that as well. So maybe what I want to be clear about here is that I'm not talking about, changing or lowering standards here. All learners do need to meet the same standards for becoming CPAs. But their journeys to meet those standards can be tailored to their specific needs. So we can really meet learners where they're at. And that's a culture of pulling students through rather than weeding them out. And I think that's really what I love about the school.
That's great. I think that's very inspiring. I think it's certainly as an educator, I also, having the experience in that space, feel that's a wonderful way to go. We want to see people succeed and help them succeed, don't we?
Certainly, yes.
So I wonder if I could also, we've talked a lot about the Western School of Business. Maybe briefly, I wondered if you could comment on the role that post-secondary institutions are playing in preparing students for the CPA certification program.
Sure. So I would say post-secondary institutions are critical partners in students' journeys to becoming CPAs. The Western school wouldn't exist if it weren't for post-secondaries. We would have no students. Post-secondary institutions do an amazing job of preparing students to succeed in the CPA program. We are seeing that they definitely help students develop skills and knowledge at that undergraduate and prerequisite level. And then that's setting them up for success once they enter PEP. But they're also delivering accredited programs, as I mentioned earlier. So there's 2 in the West, one at the U of A, and then there's another one at the University of Saskatchewan. And those 2 programs are accredited directly to the CFE. And again, both are doing an excellent job of preparing learners for success on the CFE. Maybe one of the other things I'd like to mention here too is that CPA Alberta staff, as well as CPA Western School of Business staff, do meet with post-secondary institution faculty on a regular basis. So we're discussing trends in accounting education. And we're also sharing overall performance trends for each school's learners. And we do that both for performance in CPA PEP and also on the CFE. And I think these, open discussions are critical to our partnerships with post-secondary institutions. And they also enable those schools to make any changes to their programs that they'd like to make, just to ensure that they're continuing to prepare students for success. So, we could definitely not do what we do without the amazing work that post-secondary institutions do.
That's great. I have the good fortune in my role with CPA Alberta to interact with many of the post-secondary institutions, certainly all of the ones that help prepare students for the CPA program. And I will say, I agree with everything you've said. They're doing amazing work. They're demonstrating leadership. They're looking for ways to ensure that the experience students have at their schools are going to enable them to be successful and enable them to be successful whether they go down the CPA path or some other path. And I think that's really terrific. It's always so impressive to see how the schools are dealing with these changing trends and issues in the world. So we're getting near the end, and I could talk to you for a lot longer, obviously, but I have a couple of other quick questions. Maybe just as we look to wrap up, I wonder if someone were to ask you to describe what the experience of a PEP candidate is like in 2025. How would you answer that question?
Honestly, I am envious of the experience that candidates have in PEP. I wish this program was around when I qualified. It's incredibly flexible, it's accessible, it's supportive. I think it provides a really great blend of online and in-person components. Candidates are supported throughout their entire journey by CPA facilitators and session leaders. Those are basically fancy words for teachers. And there's some really high quality learning resources, and there's plenty of opportunities to write practice cases to prepare candidates for exams. And I think the best part is that it's all designed to be done part-time while candidates are gaining their practical experience. So basically they're earning money while they're studying. It's a great program. I'm not just saying that because I work for the school. That is my honest and unbiased opinion.
I think that's great. And, it's exciting to hear that. And I agree. Everything that I hear about the program, I think to myself, man, this is the kind of thing I would have loved when I was going through the program. That's for sure. So I'm actually quite happy that my son will be going through the program because I think he's going to learn some amazing things and that will help prepare him for the future too. So I'm going to maybe finally have one last question for you because, and I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball a little bit here because, the world is a continuously changing place, and we're not going to probably arrive at a place and just say, okay, we're done. It's something that we always have to prepare ourselves for. So I wonder, what do you see as priorities for the school over the next 5 years or so in terms of programming and offerings, and what do you see going on out there in the business and accounting worlds that are likely to, drive some of those changes and help with provide the experience for tomorrow's PEP candidates?
Sure. So from the school's perspective, I'd say that implementing the new CPA certification program is a top priority. We'll need to bring that profession's new competency map to life, as I mentioned, and we'll also need to ensure that we have a smooth transition to the new program. I would also say that focusing on learning innovation is another priority. So, we talked about all the changes to the business landscape, but the education landscape is also rapidly changing. And so we do need to ensure that any of the methods that we're using are pedagogically sound. We need to make sure that we're taking advantage of education technology because that whole field is advancing rapidly. And we do need to make sure that we're leveraging data to be informing some of the decisions on how best to deliver the certification program. And I would also say that continuing to focus on accessibility, flexibility, and tailored supports is also a priority. And so again, it's all about maintaining that culture of pulling students through rather than weeding out. And then if we take a look at the broader landscape in business and accounting overall, you did mention some of the trends that we're seeing earlier. So I think technology will readily automate some of the more routine and repetitive accounting work. But that's also great news for future CPAs because, that's not the kind of work that's overly exciting. So, it will free up some more time for future CPAs to be dedicating their time and, focusing their efforts on work that actually adds value. I think that much of the work that CPAs currently do is based on historical financial information. And so we're seeing with big data analytics, tomorrow's CPAs are also going to be focusing more on real-time decision making, and they'll likely be more forward-looking as well. I think one of the other areas that provides some opportunity when it comes to big data is also data governance. So CPAs can certainly add value there. And then, we've got sustainability and ESG as another area where it's going to be providing additional opportunities for future CPAs. And here we're really looking at CPAs being able to provide rigor and structure and trust to different kinds of information. Again, not just historical financial information. So I think it's a really exciting time for the profession, and there are all kinds of opportunities for future CPAs.
Wow, that sounds very exciting indeed. And obviously, we're going to be keeping you busy for a while yet, Lara. It sounds like there's some good work ahead for you, for the school, and for many of us. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see as the future unfolds. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to ask one final question, just because I'm hoping that through this we may have even attracted some individuals who want to figure out what's next for them. And I wonder if you can provide an email address or a website address where people can go to get more information about the programs offered by CPA Western School of Business?
Oh, yes. So anyone who would like to find out more information about any of the school's offerings can go to www.cpawsb.ca. That's
great. That's a nice, easy website address, and I encourage anybody interested to go there. Well, Lara, thanks for that. And Lara, I tell you, this has been the time has gone so quickly. I wish we had more time, but we've covered a lot of ground, and you've shared a lot of wonderful insights. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today for this informative and very enlightening discussion. You've provided our listeners with so many valuable insights and perspectives, and it's been a real pleasure to chat with you today, and looking forward to ongoing conversations. I wish you a happy new year to you and your family and others in your life. And thanks again. I think we've got an exciting year ahead. And for all the work you're doing, I want to thank you on behalf of the profession for how you're helping us ensure the future of the profession is vibrant and successful. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Gord. It was such a pleasure to chat with you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation to the CPA Education Foundation by the late Brian Heshe. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. The opinions expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the CPA Education Foundation. We would like to acknowledge that the CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The CPA Education Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments on the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Heshie CPA Knowledge Centre, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation. Thanks for listening.